I see Christmas candles on a Christmas tree.
What's all this crazy question they're asking me? This is the craziest party there could ever be. Don't turn on the lights, because I don't want to see.
It's an interesting set of sensory signals. He's hearing the rooster. He's seeing the face of Jesus. Now, what do you think was the look on Jesus's face when Peter betrayed him? Do you think Jesus was mad at him? Do you think Jesus was hurt? Do you think Jesus was full of compassion already?
Man, I think for some reason, and I know this is probably not actually right, but for some reason it's like, Peter, like, this is, remember what I told you? And so like he told Peter where he was going to be at, and Peter was like, no, I'm better than that.
Yeah. So we're in John chapter 21, and this is they've already had two post-resurrection appearances with Jesus. And so they're sort of like, and they were told to go to Galilee to wait for further instructions. So they're up in Galilee, but nothing's happening apparently. So it's like, well, let's fish. So let's read it. And afterward, Jesus appeared again to his disciples by the Sea of Galilee. It happened this way. Simon Peter, Thomas, also known as Didymus, Nathanael from Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and two other disciples were together. Pause there for a minute. So it's not all of them. I think if I'm reading it correctly, it's 7 of them. Or is it not? 7 of them. So
I think that's what I think too.
They're split up. So it's just a little more than half the group. Of course, they're only 11 now after Judas's thing. So it's not the whole group. I'm going out to fish, Simon Peter told them. And they said, we'll go with you. So they went out and got into the boat. But that night they caught nothing. Early in the morning, Jesus stood on the shore, but the disciples did not realize that it was Jesus. All right. So first question, why is Jesus disguising himself? What would motivate him to be in disguise?
For instance, on the road to Emmaus, if he would have been obviously Jesus, then he wouldn't have gotten that whole description. He wouldn't have been able to break into their hearts and doing all of that.
Almost like a famous person. They're not really
undercover.
Yeah. If they recognize him, then they're not really listening. You know, on Emmaus, they get several hours of Old Testament theology. Here, they're getting breakfast with some guy on the shore, or they're about to.
That being said, John recognizes him pretty immediately still. So like they don't recognize him at first, but then as soon as he calls out, John's like, that's the Lord. So it wasn't quite as successful of an undercover as the road to Emmaus, but also the disciples know him a lot better, right? So I think that we've seen a couple times when the people didn't recognize Jesus, the road to Emmaus, and then even when Mary Magdalene didn't recognize Jesus, it was not that long for Mary Magdalene, because she also really knew Jesus. And so as soon as he said her name, she was like, oh my gosh, that's the Lord. That's Jesus.
Which brings up another question. Is Jesus still in hiding? Or is that just sort of his fun little season between the resurrection and the ascension? So which one is it, Joseph?
Fun little season.
Right, fair enough.
I think that Jesus now is in his full glory, and that we see pieces of it, and he can come down and he can be, I mean, he's still Jesus, but he doesn't, like, we wouldn't recognize him anyways, even if he looked exactly how he looked before. So
we didn't,
because all the paintings of him are this weird white dude. So
he called out to them, friends, haven't you any fish? No, they answered. He said, throw your net on the right side of the boat and you will find some. When they did, they were unable to haul the net in because of the large number of fish. Now, this is sort of like, sounds familiar, right? So where have we seen this before?
This is the original miracle. This is the original calling of Peter. He's out there fishing, not catching anything, and then Jesus says, throw it on the other side. And at that point, he was a little bit more like, we haven't caught anything. Why would we do this? But he did it anyways. This time, Jesus says that, and he just immediately does it, right?
No protest.
I think that oftentimes Jesus is bringing us back to when we've forsaken him. He brings us back to that original feeling, that original call. Jesus doesn't want Peter to stay in that normal, natural. He wants him to step into the supernatural, into the leadership calling that he has for him. So it's a total throwback to that. And so when they catch the fish, it's a reminder to Peter that, hey, you don't have to be a fisherman anymore. I've called you to something greater. Come with me. Come back to me.
It's interesting in both cases that it's a highly successful catch that precipitates leaving fishing, when normally you'd think that, hey, I'm going to keep doing this. But it's almost like Jesus is saying, provision isn't a problem. on my end, including now. They were unable to haul the net in because of the large number of fish. Then the disciple who Jesus loved said to Peter, "It's the Lord." As soon as Simon Peter heard him say, "It's the Lord," he wrapped his outer garment around him, for he had taken it off, and jumped into the water. You'd think that Peter would catch this, would figure out it's Jesus before John does. So what's with Peter that he's not?
I think John hadn't betrayed Jesus. John was still tight with Jesus. John was there the entire time. He was the only disciple that, besides the women, the only one of the 12 that stayed during the entire time, did not abandon Jesus. So I think John has a lot closer of a connection still at this point.
Okay.
So I think that's, I mean, plus it's also written by John. So John's going to point out all of Peter's faults. There's always like that kind of like fun sibling like rivalry between them. And so John's always like, and the other disciple outran Peter, like constantly doing stuff like that. And so he's going to claim it, right? Peter is unabashedly, unashamedly, relentlessly, at that point when he knows it's God, he is undignified pursuit, jumps into the water, swims towards God. And like the rest of the other 6 disciples or whatever it is, they're having to haul all 153 of these fish by themselves because Peter just abandons them, and they're not going to leave that catch there, right? And I think it's also hilarious that by the time that Peter gets there, Jesus is like, "All right, go get that fish still, like go help your buddy." So he has to go all the way back to the boat.
Why doesn't he just leave his clothes in the boat? He's just getting his clothes wet.
We see this as a little bit of a throwback to the Garden of Eden, right? Like he has shame, and so I think it's like almost like he doesn't realize he's doing it, but he's ashamed of his nakedness, right? Because he has a lot of shame already, and so he does that, wraps himself, covers himself, and then jumps in.
The other disciples followed in the boat, towing the net full of fish, for they were not far from shore, about 100 yards. When they landed, they saw a fire of burning coals with fish on it and some bread. So he's got burning coals. He's cooking fish. It's morning. Peter's soaking wet. There's a fire. It's post-resurrection, so it's probably April or May.
I see.
So it's not a hot. It's not necessarily hot, but it's kind of a neat scene. Now bring some fish. So Simon Peter climbed back into the boat, like you said, dragged the net ashore. So now Peter's still being macho Peter. He's dragging the whole net. 153 fish. Even with so many, the net was not torn.